Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Adriana, and I'm part of the team working on the Climate Lab and also part of the SI core team. And today, with my colleague, Joss Colchester, I'm going to host the event on reframing the climate crisis with systems thinking. Just a reminder that this session will be recorded. So in this 90-minute event, we will discuss how we can use systems thinking to reframe the climate crisis and to create a more systemic vision and narrative that help us respond in a more productive way to the current and future challenges related to climate change. This session will build upon the results of our iceberg workshop as an opportunity to share back the synthesized results. And if you weren't able to join us for the iceberg workshop, we will share in the chat the recording of the event. To complement the overview of the outcomes of the workshop, we will also share some findings and insights we've been collecting, and we will present the SI Climate Lab's most recent work, which is a short paper entitled Reframing the Climate Crisis with Systems Thinking. First, before we start, I'm excited to be here in London and would like to know from which part of the world you're joining us today. So please feel free and say hi in the comments. Before we start, this session will be hosted by our SI Climate Lab. So this is an initiative of the SI London Hub, which reflects on cities as an epicenter of climate change, both in terms of contributing to it and needing to adapt to it, considering not only of physical infrastructure, but also institutional structures that operate in silos and are very rigid. So our initiative aims to apply systems thinking ideas and methods to understand the challenge from a more holistic perspective and to map the factors involved and design and develop possible responses to the crisis. So here you can also see our beautiful team members working on the development of the lab. And maybe before going further with the event, I can just we can make sure that we have a common understanding of the iceberg model. So in general terms, it is a systems thinking tool designed to help an individual or group discover the patterns of behavior supporting structures and mental models that underlie a particular event or an issue. It expands their perception of a situation to see it within the context of the whole system and not limited themselves to looking at just a single activity or event or a problem. And an iceberg is used as analogy to represent the underlying structures generating perceived events and issues. And the expression, also tip of an iceberg, is used to connote that what one can see is only a small part of a whole situation, and therefore there is much more below the surface, and what it looks like may be surprising. And just like an iceberg is a large percentage of what is going on in our world is hidden from view, and the iceberg model tries to make this explicit by depicting it in series of layers and sit below what we can observe every day. And now I stop sharing and I give the floor to Joss, who will continue.
Great, okay, Jenna. And just the last little section there. well, myself, Joss Costa, as mentioned, with the SI platform team, and also working on this lab here, and was here for past workshop. Great to see many of you back again, and looking forward to discussing what we came up with there. So just to finish a little note there, if you remember, if you were here last time, we took this canvas and went down one side of the iceberg to think about existing, patterns and trends and outcomes and structures and mental models, and then we go up the other side to think about future ones, future mental models. The kind of key aspect of it is that idea in systems thinking and systems change, that it's real systemic stuff. The real changes come from our mental models. So we're going down here to really see what are those mental models leading to the structures that we get at the moment. And then if we change that paradigm, what would emerge out of that in terms of new structures, new outcomes and so forth. So that's what we were working on last time. And that's what we will look at again today, the synthesized version of it. That's what it looked like when we finished last time. It was a great session, but we didn't get much time to discuss it or really see what was going on. A little bit difficult to look at it like that. So myself, Adriana, and a few others from the lab team worked on this and synthesized it. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But as mentioned, we have also been working on this. When we first started this lab about 5-6 months ago, this was the initial stage of trying to unpack our thinking around this and to use some of our tools from systems thinking to shift that paradigm. But if we start here, this was one exercise we did when we started, which is this canvas called the context mapping canvas. And it was really a way, when we were first getting started, and we aren't experts in climate change, we were trying to just, in a sense, just throw everything up there on the wall of what we thought we knew, or what was involved here, should we say, and what we wanted to research. And what was, if we have climate resilient cities in the center there, then what are the factors affecting that? And this first circle was the immediate things that are affecting it. So obviously, industry, electricity and heating, agriculture, land use, economics, finance, and so forth. And it's something like a mind map, really, is one way of thinking about it. But we're thinking about the most immediate things here first, and then stepping back and saying, what's the broader context of factors that's affecting those there? These are the kind of linear things that we talk about, right? So we say, oh, these are the immediate things affecting the situation. But we wanted to kind of go a step further, a bit like the iceberg does, move to the kind of non-linear, the overall context that's actually creating that dynamic that we're in at the moment. So started kind of mapping that out. And again, it's good when you're in the early stages of, I guess, sense making and just exploring what's going on here, that you can just throw things up and then start kind of digging into them and researching a little bit. Well, what's going on around food? What's going on around animal husbandry and how we're using soil and so forth? And up here, things around residential electricity use and commercial use of electricity, materials, really interesting stuff around concrete and so forth. So this was really an exercise to try and get everything out of our heads and put it up there, and very useful in getting started here. But then moved on to what we're dealing with today, really, of exploring the current narrative and current ways that we as societies are framing this challenge of climate change. So looking at it quite broadly here. And over here, I did some research around that, obviously looking into, the way the media is kind of portraying it, and some text analysis around the words that we're using when we talk about it, and so forth there. And use this canvas here, it's called the Systems Thinking Canvas, which tries to shift our thinking, help us shift our thinking from ecosystem thinking to ecosystem thinking along a number of dimensions. So recognize that a number of dimensions to becoming a systems thinker, about shifting from a piecemeal view of the world to a holistic view, from a reductionist view to an emergent view, from a linear view to a non-linear view, from a centralized to a decentralized network view of the world. So it's kind of, and then down here from a linear to non-linear view. So it's looking at the existing kind of paradigm and seeing it as very much, well, as we would expect to some extent, reflexive of this reductionist worldview. It's a partial kind of account of the situation. We're looking at kind of the outcomes from the system. It's a linear one. We look at the biggest factors that are immediately kind of affecting the situation. It's centralized. When we ask about who's going to do something about this, we look to the kind of largest institutions and say, well, our governments, the top people should do something about this. And it's quite a static one. It doesn't really, it's looking at the outcomes again. It's not actually looking at the whole thing as, you know, there's a carbon cycle, there's a system behind all of this. And maybe the problem, you know, the problem is really an imbalance within that dynamical system. And how can we go about resetting that and changing it? So you're welcome to jump into this. The board will be available for you. Have you shared the board, Adriana, in the link so that people can
yeah, I've shared the board, and I also shared the recording of our iceberg workshop in case you want to watch it. And yeah, so.
Great. So this, I'm not going to go into all of this now. It'll be here for you to look at now or look at afterwards. But it's essentially what we were trying to do in our workshop, but in a slightly different way, using this canvas to shift the thinking. And really, ultimately, we're trying to take what is at the moment seen as, by many people, when you look into the research, when you kind of analyze the dialogue out there, you see that it's a problem, and it's often an overwhelmingly complex problem that we feel we can't do something about, and it's a problem that needs fixing. We need to prevent emissions is normally the kind of narrative around it, and then a bit about adaptation. But generally, it's a problem, and it's a very complicated problem, and it's a big problem, and we're going to need big institutions to fix this for us. And try and shift that to something more productive, in a sense. Excuse me, the lights just gone off. 1 second. Shift that to something more productive as an opportunity for much needed transformation. Right? We know that this is not an accidental thing. This is a function of very dysfunctional relationship with our ecosystems and the natural environments and our socio-ecological systems that are not working very well. So how do we shift the narrative from a problem that is overwhelmingly complex and needs fixing to one that is looking at this as a systemic issue and seeing this opportunity for addressing, you know, deeper issues here that have gone on kind of challenged for a long time, and an opportunity for transformation and making real change that has been needed for a long time, and shifting to this ecosystem view to do that. So that was that. I don't want to go on lecturing for too long. It's just to say, out of that came this short paper, Reframing the Climate Crisis with Systems Thinking. It's really just a slide. We didn't want to, you know, do more research and write big long papers that no one reads. We just wanted to do a slide presentation. You'll be able to find it here. There's a link to the PDF if you just click there. So it's really looking at what we had up there, the different dimensions, and saying, okay, what does it mean in a very concise way, a short way, to communicate this shift from looking at kind of snapshots to a systemic view. And it's part of what I said there. Our thinking on climate change is very much piecemeal. We focus on the immediate pain points, such as energy and fossil fuel emissions. This blinds us to the complex systems out of which the issue emerges. Climate change is fundamentally an imbalance in the carbon cycle on Earth, which forms a system. Like all complex systems, it's been regulated through the evolution of many balancing feedback loops that have evolved over time, and essentially we've kind of disrupted those and created a lot of positive feedback in the system. What we're dealing with is a whole system that is out of equilibrium, really, due to these broken feedback loops, which are leading to increased positive feedback loop, destabilizing climate, and it's not just the climate, we've eroded and broken many other destabilizing feedback loops. If we're ever to tackle climate change in a way that could make sustained progress, it will mean it will have to be a systemic perspective. It's looking at these processes, cycles, feedback loops, and working with them. Ultimately, climate change, ultimately the challenge here is about the integrity of the carbon cycle. It's not just one kind of metric or this or that, it's about a complex system. So that's just that, trying to shift from snapshots to a systemic, looking at the underlying system, shifting from a reductionist approach to this or perspective to an emergent one. What do we mean by that? We think about climate change from the reductionist perspective of the individual. How can we as individuals reduce our emissions and our carbon footprint? By taking a systems perspective, we might see the issue as less a failure of our individual actions and maybe more a failure of our capacity for collective action. It's quite often, quite rarely talked about the issue that we aren't really able to work together effectively or coordinate ourselves effectively as individuals in new ways in response to this challenge. We talk about how individuals have to reduce their carbon footprint, or we talk about how governments are not doing a very good job. We don't talk very much about how we can actually get together and coordinate ourselves in much more effective ways, maybe like these birds or other complex systems. So we defer to existing centralized bureaucratic institutions when what's needed is new ways for us to collaborate through growing new networks that enable us to work together. Won't go into all of that, just stay going. This question here, shifting from a linear view to a more decentralized view of it. Our thinking around climate change is linear in the sense that we search for immediate causes of the issue and try to fix those. We focus on the biggest parts of the system, the largest, most immediate problem, and the greatest force we can bring to bear to change that. And this creates a lot of the narrative that we hear out there in the world. Our vision to talking about, we're primarily talking about CO2 emissions, and we look at the greatest force can fix that, government regulation, big capital and so forth. When we centralize our response, we defer our capacities and responsibilities and sit and wait for others quite often to do things. These institutions do things for us. A nonlinear approach, a more decentralized approach, moves away from a direct cause and effect, problem and solution framing of the issue, enabling us to look at the broader system and the many different factors that are resulting in the emergence of the issue. System thinking helps us to look at the network pattern that is resulting in the emergence of the issue and to innovate in those networks. Shifting from thinking of the problem as being out there and looking for the most immediate solution to thinking of it as more a function of the systemic patterns we've created in our thinking and relations, our ways of relating. What is needed is for us to find ways to collaborate in a decentralized fashion. What is needed is a movement to ask how can all of our collective capacities be best unlocked and utilized. Okay, so finally, just this shift from resistance to adaptation and also transformation. We have increasingly, started talking about adaptation, but at what point do we start talking about transformation? At what point do we really accept that this is going to require, a massive transformation because of the scale of the challenge? So current framing of climate change focuses on a problem that we need to prevent and try to fix. Climate change is systemic. It's not a problem with one part of the system that can be isolated and tackled through a traditional linear planning approach. It instead emerges out of the very way we've set up our economic and socio-ecological systems. So it's really transformation there that's needed. Because of this, it's not a problem that needs fixing. It's instead an opportunity to look at the systemic imbalances in our socio-ecological systems and think about how we may address these. Climate change requires transformation that will last many decades. If we can't shift it from being a problem to being an opportunity, we'll not sustain the effort. Simply trying to resist change or adapt will not be sufficient in the long run. Climate change is about transformation. Most of all, we need to learn how to simultaneously adapt, mitigate, adapt, and transform the complex systems we form part of. And that's why system change and innovation has such relevance here, that last part of being able to transform complex systems. Are there questions in the chat, Adriana, or we good there? We stay going?
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, if
Great.
you have any questions or doubts, yeah, just put them in the chat and I will.
Yeah, we'll have a chance to discuss things now in a minute. We've got our board here where we pose a few questions and we'll be able to have a conversation. But just to look at this first, this is what the resulting synthesis of your work and the others who were here 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. And we're just going to walk through this relatively quickly, and then we'll have a conversation about it afterwards. So what we did was we sorted through the sickies, and we essentially read them all and looked for themes or patterns and started clustering them around those main themes that we saw. It's a little bit challenging because this is about collective intelligence. We have a lot of different people come from different areas posting up a lot of different things. So we're just looking for trends and patterns in that. So this is current events. This means what we're asking here is what does the world look like at the moment? What's the output of the existing system? A lot of stuff around consequences. High prices, energy, increased interest in resilience thinking. Yeah, we looked at some of these before, so maybe I just touch upon the main themes. So consequences, ineffective solutions. Lots of those. A lot of people posted around just the current. Yeah, I mean, COP27 sponsored by Coca-Cola. Greenwashing, for example, is what people are saying. Environmental degradation and climate change. So this is, I guess those are the two main ones that we're seeing: a collapsing environments, collapsing ecosystems, and changing climates, but at the same time, ineffective solutions that are not really addressing that. So those are the main themes around outcomes. Who's the target audience for the document you just vividly described, and what is your ideal outcome? Asked Dennis. Okay, so we're a lab for helping people think about and address climate change in a new way through systems thinking. So just like this event, we're an open lab, and we do these open events, and we produce these for people who feel it resonates with them and makes sense for them. So it's essentially for anyone who wants to take a different perspective and approach this. Yeah, okay, I stay going. So that was the events. These are current patterns. Patterns of the trends over time that we see. So how are things changing? Business as usual, a lot of it saying that, you know, things are just stay going on the way they're going on. So particularly around the GDP, continues to rule, I guess, is the main thing there. Business as usual, it doesn't account for externalities really. At the same time, growing awareness, right? More people are becoming aware of this, and we've definitely seen that in the past couple of years. A lot more people talking about it, and a lot more interest in it. But again, lack of effective responses. We aren't necessarily going in the right direction there. Yep, increased natural disasters. And consumption trends. A lot of what they're saying is that, yeah, for example, energy demand is increasing globally. And fast fashion not stopping anytime soon. Sustainable lifestyles. There's different things here, right? There's quite nuanced stuff here. Some things are going in positive directions, but many aren't. Overconsumption of water, for example. People are over-consuming electricity, heating, and so forth. Okay, so those are the main trends there. Business as usual continuing, but growing awareness to this issue. There's a lack of effective response, increased natural disasters, and consumption trends. Many of those were around increased consumption. Okay, current structures. So these are the rules, the norms, the ways that information moves around, the power structures, the distribution of resources, and so forth of the existing system. And inequality in climate change regarding countries, structural inequalities in race and class, and so forth. Economic structures, people talking about the linear economy, and GDP as the holy grail. Model of the world is based on economic growth. Markets are efficient. Markets can efficiently solve the problem. So a lot of talk about economic structures and finance. So institutional structures up here. Bureaucracy, rules and norms, multi-stakeholder networks. Yeah. Transactional model versus relational models. This is one thing we've discussed in our lab quite a bit, that the lack of, the silos, bureaucratic nature of our public institutions and social institutions renders them ineffective for, dealing with these systemic cross-cutting issues. Climate change is kind of characterized as being cross-cutting. But our institutions are divided up into silos, and then when you actually try and make changes or you try and respond effectively to a holistic challenge, they can't do that. And I think we see that quite a bit. I think that's what happens when we have a crisis. It's really revealed that the ways we're organizing in the public sphere and social institutions are in a form that mismatches the holistic network nature of the challenges. So governance, a big one here. Regulation, poor governance structures, government leaders living in a bubble. Short-term thinking. We are scared, we're scared of change, even if the change is beneficial to us in the long run. Not invented here. Every org is inventing their own wheel. Yeah, it goes back to the siloed nature, the fractured nature. Focus on government regulation as vehicle for change. Okay, so to stay going, that was the existing structures, and down here, the mental models that prevail at the moment. Linear thinking. Linear thinking, short-term thinking, I think is definitely connected to that. It's your problem and you're experiencing, so it is your responsibility. The individual thinking, kind of reductionist thinking, breaking it down to the smallest unit. Tend to react on every event that can be immediately solved or addressed. Definitely in a reactive mode at the moment. Event-centric versus looking at simple rules and agents of complex adaptive systems. Yeah. So linear thinking, complexity. Yeah, part of the issue I was mentioning before around how we're portraying this and thinking about it as societies is that it's too big and it's too complex and it's overwhelming, and it's also becomes a problem with the media too, because they aren't really properly equipped to really deal with the complexity of these issues, so they start putting it into simplified models also. But complexity was an important part of this, a poor knowledge, poor capacity to grasp the complexity of this, and to put it into a format that is able for the average person to really grasp it and feel like they can understand it and then do something about it in that sense. So we often get caught up, immobilized is maybe the word, by the sense that this is too complex, we can't really make sense of it properly. Beliefs and fear of change. In the session 2 weeks ago, one gentleman, I'm not sure if he's here now, talked about his, I think it was his wife or brother-in-law, one of them having a religious perspective and the other one having a kind of neoliberal perspective on this, or just different beliefs and narratives that made them ill-equipped to actually grasp this and do something about it. Going back to that idea of the market will fix it, you know, it's kind of a belief system that doesn't allow us to really adapt and respond to this effectively. So those were things here, and obviously fear of change is kind of deep rooted here. Trust, values, power. Yeah, a lot of stuff we know. Power is, that's part of the inertia. Trust, loss of trust in governments, crisis of trust and legitimacy. Climate is really a geopolitical idea to drive money flows. Yeah, lack of trust is making it difficult for us to actually work together. Questions around responsibility and accountability. And then values was going to back to the kind of market logic and economic values, consumerism, market fixing logic, and this goes to metrics and incentives for our understanding of what it means to be successful in life. Business is about making profit, not fixing the world. An interesting one there. And then this was the big one, ecosystem thinking. Kind of focusing on ourselves, ego-driven, lack of ecosystem thinking, human ego, nature will fix itself, human-centric view of the world, egocentric worldview, eco-anxiety, climate doesn't really affect me, it's the government's job. Ecosystem thinking prevalent in decision-making. Yeah. An interesting one there. That's the big one kind of down at the base that we see. So that's one side of the iceberg, which is unpacking what exists at the moment. And let's move on here to the other side. And this is changing the paradigm there, changing the mental model, changing the thinking. What would be a future mental model and values that might be needed to shift the dynamic here? So again, values here, more valuing of relationships than things, core values towards real impact, radical compassion, willingness to engage in deconstruction of current worldviews and beliefs. So those are some of the values that are thought to be needed to change. Participation, yeah, people actually engaging and not deferring to others, listen to the voice on the ground, collective thinking and action. We can all make change together, and kind of how might we actually do something together? Ways to make stakeholders agree on interdisciplinary concepts and actions. So participation instead of deferring it. Equality. A lot of talk about just transition, and not everything is about growth for growth's sake. Intergenerational fairness and justice, and embrace vulnerabilities. Again, when we're doing that initial research, that context mapping you saw at the beginning, equality is a huge one that pops out when you just see the disparities in the world. You know, a person in India or Bangladesh is producing like a tiny amount of the emissions relative to someone in a developed economy, and you know, the amount of wealth held by a small percentage at the top versus the people at the bottom. When you start unpacking that and how it affects climate change, you see this is actually a massive thing, equality, and needs to be really part of any solution. So environments learn from nature. Yeah, I guess it's getting to more ecological thinking and recognizing the need to kind of integrate ecosystems into what we do, and biomimicry and so forth. It's our planet and everyone has a role to play. Follow natural cycles. Yeah, so really integrating with and not being scared of and pushing away the ecosystem. I guess putting the two together, right, instead of separating them. So building systems from a place of care and nurture and possibility, and not from places of fear and lack. those environments, systemic change down here, recognizing, embracing complexity. Yeah, it's going to be part of the learning journey, I think, here. Learning to embrace complexity, systems stewardship, systems thinking, systems innovation, ability to shift to and from systemic to systemic thinking. Okay, so awareness, self-awareness as part of this, love of self, collaboration, self-control. I don't need so much. Yeah, it's definitely this whole process, going through this whole process is going to create a new level of self-awareness, and a high degree of reflexivity will be part of it. I'm part of something bigger, hence my actions have an impact. Yeah, so getting to systems awareness, actions towards sustainability, full cost accounting, transcend individualism, carbon footprint analysis, being okay with being confronted with uncomfortable truths. Yeah, so those are the future mentor models. I'm going to go quickly for the sake of time. Future structures that may emerge out of those: economic structures, ESG, circular by design. That would be a cool one, wouldn't it? Shifting to circular structures, whether in how we do water, energy, whatever it is, materials, degrowth, rental economy. So new metrics, yep. New ways of assessing, economics of care, well-being, new governance structures, and new social mindset. So those are some of the new structures. I guess it would involve the changing of institutional structures also, as well as economics and metrics. So to stay going up here, future patterns that we might see, new organizational values, green, less harmful materials being used, climate stabilizers, hitting emissions goals. So these are the trends that we might start seeing, the changes we might start seeing over time. Having structures that deal with bounded rationality and the institutional setup. Sustainable economic development, better use of resources, decentralized systems, education, better education over time, actually learning and greater awareness, greater participation, local action plays a bigger role, and then changes around values there also. So just in terms of the final one here, outcomes, what might we see? More sustainable outcomes over time and improvements in green energy markets, in the north-south divide narrowing, wealthy countries struggle but still provide poor country assistance. Okay. So more stable systems, ultimately. Cleaner energy is accessible to most. Regenerative society, increasing life expectancy of all planetary organisms. Most homes now carbon negative. Okay, so that's there. We'll leave it for you. And as I say, this board will be available. You can come back and sort through that. We wanted to have an opportunity for a little discussion around it. We came up with a few ideas here. If Adriana could share the link.
Yeah, just before we go further, Dora has a question. We add what is being worked on already, and like World Bank working on renewing accounting from frameworks. Dora, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I was just interested to know, because we are not like reinventing the wheel, right? There is a whole lot of things are happening already. So it would be interesting to know if there is a gap somewhere, or what is the aspect that is not being addressed.
Yeah, good question. I'd say this is just one part of what we're doing in our lab, one dimension around rethinking the mental models and the framing and the narrative. There are other dimensions we're working on also around, mapping the different factors affecting this, but also mapping kind of the ecosystem of actors and so forth. And I think that's getting more to that area. What's missing in our interventions, the places we're trying to make changes, what's missing in that network of actors that are trying to make stuff happen. Yeah, okay, should we stay going, Jenna?
Yeah, so we would like to have a little discussion. So here we have different questions. So please access the Miro board. You have the link in the chat. And you can grab a sticky and share your thoughts around these questions. You can answer whatever question that resonates to you, and after that we will discuss the outcomes, and we have 5 or 10 minutes to work on that.
So maybe just quickly we'll go through the questions to take a look at those.
Yeah, sure. So we have, what were your overall learnings from going through the full process? How did going through the exercise help you, and just learning the ideas, and how do we design solutions from this? Then we have, is there an emerging themes we see? Can systems thinking help us find in this challenge new opportunities for transformation? Another question is there anything you found you would be able to take away and apply in your own context? Does the iceberg model reduce or increase climate anxiety? And is there an action plan that can be taken from this? And did it help you to look at different dimensions to the issue? So yeah, we have about 7 minutes to work on that, and then we come back to discuss.
So the board is at the end here. Maybe I'll give you a link to this specific board, and to do it, you just click on the sticky on the left-hand side here. You place it down. You can color it however you want, and try and keep it quite small, and cluster them around the questions, and then you simply type in your response there. And you can choose whichever one, as many as you want.
Okay, so now maybe we can go through the answers and discuss a little bit. So we have the question, what were your overall learning from going through the full process? Provided a holistic view of the problem. Who put this? If you want to say anything else. Or
did it help anyone change their thinking about it? Does anybody want to say any insights they got from this in terms of changing their thinking?
Or maybe getting a better understanding of it, of the issue, or did it help you to look at different dimensions to issue? Yes, to take a comment which is presented as a negative and turn it into a positive opportunity and then apply to the iceberg analysis to that issue. For example, the Coca-Cola as a sponsor of COP. Do you want to share this with us?
Yes, I'd be happy to. It was me who made the comment in the chat and I extended it onto the board. To be honest, I was struggling with some of the navigation around the board because I haven't used Miro recently. But I felt that this was a really powerful technique, but then every negative that's presented as an issue can be turned upside down, and you can then use the same analysis techniques to expand that issue into a whole series of influencing factors that can be taken from that. I mean, you can very quickly get lost in the complexity of that process, but I think it really helps look through the other end of a telescope at an issue which is seen as being a negative, but actually could be perceived as a positive. For example, Coca-Cola are sponsoring COP27 because they make a huge amount of money from selling soft drinks. That in itself, I mean, Coca-Cola actually, I think it could be seen as greenwashing, but equally, if you look behind the scenes, Coca-Cola has spent a huge amount of effort in decarbonizing their own production processes and their own operations. And they've built up a huge amount of experience and know-how from that. And if they can be encouraged to share that know-how through a facility like COP27, then that becomes a very powerful way of accelerating the change which is needed.
Great. Just, do you want to say something or?
No, thanks, Laurie. So maybe say going surface effects,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe
effects.
resistance change and see the need to go deeper. And I'm not sure if this the sticky goes as a complement to the above one. And the co-create approach was valuable to surface plenty of dimensions and share different views. And this way the dimensions become more tangible with reading this in the text. So yes, actually the exercise itself was key to provide the engagement mode. Do we have any further comments on that, or?
I think it kind of says it all. We've just got 10 minutes or less to let's get going.
The iceberg model reduce or increase climate anxiety, as there an action plan that can be taken from this? I would say both. The task of really changing a system can seem overwhelming, but on the other hand, the iceberg is a great way to identify leverage points. And then we have another thought. Yes, it is in the nature of the tool to provide this transparency, and that's is the purpose. Scary and optimistic, and it's a tool that makes us reflect, see, and eventually take action. First step, one at a time. Absolutely, yeah. So,
can systems thinking help us to turn this challenge into a new opportunity for transformation?
Yeah. So there we have. Yeah. Go. Just.
Bajak, Do you want to speak on this?
Sure. Yeah, so I put this in. Yeah, what did I put? Yeah, so again, I said that we need to think in new ways. I think it's all about like a mindset shift. I also put another in one of the other post-its. I put that I feel like we have this mindset, especially when we're problem solving, that you always start to think about how can I solve it, and that's where obviously systems thinking kind of forces you a little bit to step back and really understand what is the challenge that you're actually working on. So I think just from that, yes, I think systems thinking can help us find new opportunities for transformation, because you will not just go for whatever you know, because again, people will always tend to revert back to what they know. So if you're dealing with a specific problem, you'll probably just think about what's already there and then try to add like just one layer above that and say, okay, well, maybe we can do this, rather than actually going back and asking the question, which is fundamental to systems change, which is why is this a problem in the first place? So yeah, so that's the mindset shift.
I guess that problem solution framing is never going to give transformation, is it? It's always going to be what's possible, what's incrementally possible, and how do we fix these problems that we have, rather than, as you say, looking at the underlying structures out of which they emerge. And it's only from there that you're going to get transformation. Okay, great. There are opportunities to align multiple facets of urban planning to leverage benefits. Okay, and do you want to look at these ones, Adriana?
Yeah, is there an emerging we see? Could be the dominant feedback loops, making individuals' levels of abstraction higher, and mindset shift in the way we view problem solving.
This is making individual levels of abstraction higher. Hideki, do you want to talk on that? Could be the dominant feedback loops. Judith, do you want to explain what you mean here? Are you with us, Judith? Yeah, we can't hear you. You seem to be unmuted, but we can't hear you, unfortunately. Maybe you could put something in the chat. Okay, we stay going. So down here, Adriana.
How do we design solution from this? Solutions or interventions. Systems do not get solved, they can get better or worse, so we can make systems better and more flexible. Everyone here is a believer. How do we influence those who aren't here but should be? And perhaps rank the issues down to the most critical. And
what have you, Bajag, what have you shared here, the Google Drive?
That is actually a good question. Maybe I should delete that one. I actually don't know what that is. So
okay.
Forgive me for that.
Random experiment. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
That's what we need. We need random experiments.
Well, we're in the lab here. Don't worry. Experiments are okay. Yeah. Okay. So great. Solutions or interventions. So have we covered everything there? Did we talk on this one here yet? Yeah, we did. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
and we have a question in the chat from Tobias. We have around about 8 and 40 post-it notes in the iceberg template. How do we move forward? For example, how do we identify the most effective drivers?
Yeah, so actually that's going to be our next, that's a good segue, right? The time's up, and what's the next event? Well, our next event will be around that, right? So this is just one dimension to what we're doing in our climate lab. And this dimension here is around exactly what we've been talking about, rethinking the mental models according to systems thinking. The next stage is then kind of, as you say, how do we map this out and get a clearer understanding of the factors involved and then the places to intervene? And that's what we've been working on also. So hopefully we haven't got it listed yet or fully put together, but hopefully later in January, maybe mid-January, we'll have another open lab session where we show you our findings on that and discuss it and see how you guys might be involved and get your input also. So that'll be the next one around leverage points, particularly with respect to climate resilience and transformation. So there we go. Time's up. Adriana, do you want to say last words?
Yeah, so here you can find us a link to our to the platform, to our group, to the Climate Lab group, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated about next events and insights we are sharing. And you can post also your feedback